Welcome to the Journey of the Fool, a walk through the major arcana of the tarot. The major arcana cards are the first 22 cards of the tarot deck and contain archetypes of the human condition and the human experience. We can learn much about life, ourselves, and others around us with the powerful cards of the major arcana. Our journey begins with the Fool. Now you'll notice that he is standing there all by his lonesome, looking like he is ready to juggle and take on the world. In many decks, he is shown as walking off a cliff, but here he is symbolizing and beginning a new journey. He doesn't know all of the tools that he has to use. He doesn't know what's coming before. He just knows that he feels like setting off on a journey. And so he begins, playful and full of confidence. The first soul that our Fool meets along his journey is the Magician. He is in awe by this elder and mystical figure that seems to be in control of everything. The Magician takes a few moments to explain to the Fool that there are many tools that he will need along his journey: earth, air, fire, water, and most of all, spirit. The Magician explains to the Fool that he must learn to understand and utilize these tools in order to be successful as he goes ahead. As the Fool leaves the presence of the Magician, he comes across a beautiful and mystical lady who speaks in a very soft yet wise voice. She teaches him that darkness is the key to all mystery and that one must look within in order to adequately see without. She also explains to him, with the two pillars behind her, that life is about balance. There is both day and night to balance out the day, and one must understand themselves in the night in order to walk fully in the day. She shares her wisdom, knowledge, and her mysticism with him. Leaving the realm of the mystics, the Fool stumbles back into the light of day and comes upon the Empress in her garden. In the garden, the Empress is tending to her children and to the earth. And she explains to the Fool that to go forward in life, he must walk with intention. He must learn where to put his energies, and that when he puts his whole heart and soul into something, then the earth and the energies of the universe around him will bless him. But he must walk softly and with intention. Wherever he puts his energies, he will see a harvest. And as you reap, you will sow, she says to the Fool. The Emperor, hearing this, marches up and says, "That may be as it may be, wife, but I find that the best way to go forward in life is to exercise authority and take control." He turns, looking at the Fool, and tells the Fool, "Young man, you must show who's in charge. You must be in charge of yourself and those around you. But my caution to you is this: follow your own rules, my son. Lead by example, but lead you must, and with authority." Having overheard this conversation, the wizened old priestly advisor to the Queen and the King come up and take the young man by the shoulders. "Come, my lord, my lady, let me lead this young man away and teach him the ways of faith." Quietly they go aside in the garden as the priest explains to the young man that all the mysticism and all the realism in the world rings hollow and rings empty without a sense of faith, whether it be a faith in the gods or a goddess or even just oneself. That you must find a place of peace, a place of belief within yourself to hold and bind everything together. They sit together for a while and meditate until the young Fool feels like he has indeed learned a basis of understanding recognizing the divine within himself and within the world around him. Feeling emboldened by his experience and the knowledge of his elders, he runs across a beautiful young woman. Their eyes meet, and he instantly feels a spiritual connection with her. He embraces her and she him as they fall quickly and fastly in love with one another, recognizing the spiritual connections of eons past that still bind them with one another. They fall into one another's arms and spend many passionate nights together, exploring one another both physically and spiritually. He is quite content with this beautiful love for a time, and revels in it and enjoys the spiritual connections as well as the physical pleasures. Eventually, the fool realizes that his journey is not yet over, and he is not yet complete. So he must continue his journey before returning to his lover to truly enjoy all the spiritual depths that union has to offer. So he goes forward, remembering the lessons of before, realizing that he must now take control of his journey rather than wandering this way or that, and that he must go forward with purpose. So he sets out to see what life has to offer, moving forward at a rapid pace, allowing things to blow by in pursuit of his goals. As he continues to march forward, he realizes that he has found an inner strength within himself, that he himself carries many of these tools that were taught to him by the magician, the priestess, the empress, and the emperor, and that he himself has an inner strength and an inner fortitude, that he can face any obstacle that comes his way. His confidence grows as he recognizes his internal strength, and he realizes that he does not necessarily need to manipulate the world around him, but simply to harness the strength and the fire that he holds within his own soul. This revelation gives him pause, and he remembers what the wizened priest said to him, how little life means without a belief, without an understanding of self. Having been through more experiences, he feels he needs to take some time apart, some time away from the rush of his journey, to truly see and to contemplate and to understand the bigger picture of the world around him before he moves forward. So he takes some time apart, and he sits and he learns from himself and from his past, and he learns to see the bigger picture of the world around him. The fool, no longer being so foolish, realizes that there is a time and a season for everything, and that events seem to cycle around. When he doesn't learn a lesson, he gets to repeat that opportunity so that he may learn a life lesson. He begins to see the bigger picture and knows that seasons come and seasons go, and yet he learns and grows, and the truth always remains. If he doesn't like a moment, he may continue, and he will find another sunrise and another moment as things cycle around the wheel of time. Deciding now to continue his journey forward at long last, he stumbles next upon a village that is holding an open court out in the city square. He sits and observes for a time, and he watches the wheels of justice as they turn, realizing that no matter what, people weren't happy, that there was no satisfying everybody, that somebody was always upset, and things rarely seemed completely fair despite everybody's best efforts. He realizes from this that justice cannot be blind, that justice must do everything it can to be fair, and that he must do what he can to keep life fair and honorable. Dismayed by the workings of the world, he feels he needs some time apart, so he sets himself again some time for meditation, this time placing himself in a different perspective by hanging himself upside down and looking at the world from a totally different view. From this, he realizes that sometimes he cannot look at things through his own filter. He must understand to walk in the shoes of another and understand how they see the world, and that to truly get a perspective, he must look at things from multiple directions. Once again, the fool picks himself up, dusts himself off, and moves forward. And as he goes along his journey, he passes by and sees a young couple moving into their home, full of excitement and vigor. He continues down the road, and he sees a funeral procession where an old widow is mourning her beloved husband. He realizes that the more you go through life, the more you experience change, and that you cannot fight change, but that change itself drives life forward. That this is something that can be happy or mournful, but all things have their time, as he learned before. Further down the road, he is greeted by an angel balancing fire and water. The angel speaks to the fool and says, "A fool you are no longer, for you have journeyed through and you have learned. And you must learn that with change, the balance is maintained. But you yourself must become the balance between light and dark, fire and water. Remember the lessons of the high priestess to look within. Remember the lessons of all that you have passed through, to know that spiritual and physical, metaphysical and practical must work together and be balanced. You hold the balance and you control this. Do not let others sway you, for ahead of you there lies temptation and things that would dissuade you from your balance. Be warned, young fool, not to make the fool's choice." The fool listens and hears and contemplates as he continues to walk down the road. Eventually, he hears sounds of revelry and merrymaking from ahead of him. He comes around the bend and sees a large mansion with people in all kinds of revelry and debauchery. From this mansion spilling out into the lawn and into the courtyards, merrymaking and drinking, and beckoning the fool to come and join them, for they are having fun. And he smiles and does. He goes to join them. Days, even months pass, and he realizes that the fun and the debauchery is not all it is cracked up to be, that this life feels empty and he feels trapped. Realizing that nobody will save him but himself, he finally picks up his head, stands up, and decides no more will he be a slave to his wanton desires and to the temptations around him that would sway him from his true path and his true journey. Having stumbled upon this revelation, he decides that he must share it with his fellow merrymakers. "Turn away from this life," he says to all of them. "Don't you understand that you are only drinking yourself into oblivion, and that life is going on around you? That there is so much more to learn and grow and do and see than this?" They laughed at him and they mocked him, reducing all of his expectations to powder. He realized that when he built this tower of expectations in his mind, he felt that others would hear and understand his message. But he realized that he could expect nothing of anyone save himself, because to have expectations outside of reality, outside of oneself, the only thing that one can control, is to invite disaster and disappointment. He hung his head and walked away and left those to their merrymaking. The fool then realized that he had truly been a fool, not only to fall into temptation, but to try to expect others to hear his call to live and to change their ways. He realized that all he could do was to be himself, to be true to himself, and to pour out himself and his light to the world as he walked his own path, caring nothing for how people saw him or how they judged him, but simply knowing that he could do what was right in any circumstance and any situation, and that in itself would be a beacon of light to those around him and a source of joy and hope to himself. As he walked down the road, the sun set and the moon began to rise. In the distance, at a nearby village, he could hear domesticated dogs barking, and they were echoed deep in the forest by the howls of the wolves, free and wild. He began to think that he was very much like this, that he had a duality and a balance within him, much like he had learned throughout his journeys, that part of him was that wild and free spirit that was indomitable and would always be present. Yet he started to understand that he had obligations to home and hearth to make a life for himself and for his lover that he left behind. As the moon continued to rise high in the sky, its full light shining a soft white light over everything, he realized that sometimes he needed to judge the world a little less harshly, to look at things in a softer light by the light of the moon. He smiled as he realized to himself that he missed home, and using the moon and the stars, began to chart his course home as he settled into his camp for one more night. After a good night's rest, the fool woke up to see the sun rising in the east, and he filled himself with hope, for today began his journey home, knowing that he had learned so much through his travels that now he could go home and be with his beloved and celebrate, knowing that life would go his way, because he understood that his planets were coming into alignment, and his happy feet began their journey home. His journey home did not seem overlong to him, but he had plenty of time to think over all of the things that he had learned throughout his journey, and he realized that sometimes you needed to take what was right and what you need and leave the rest behind. He realized that he needed to let go of those things which he learned which no longer served him, but hold on to those lessons which he found precious and beneficial, so that he could not carry the dust of the road once he got home. He spent this time on his journey home cleansing himself physically, mentally, and emotionally, going through his shadows, understanding his demons, so that when he came home clean and a new man. As he arrived home, his wife got a glimpse of him out of her window and came rushing out to meet him, babe in arms. "Welcome home," they said, and they hugged, and he smiled, and he realized that this was where his journey truly began. This home, this family, this was truly his. All the lessons that he carried with him were his to use to begin this new journey and this new adventure. No longer the fool, but the wizened man with the world ahead of him. He looks over at his young child on the hip of his wife, smiles having met his son for the first time, and says, "Son, someday you too shall journey, and someday you too shall be wise. But meanwhile, I shall teach you all I know, because now we journey together." I hoped that this has helped you learn more about the major arcana of the tarot, and maybe just a little bit about your own journey. For more teaching on the tarot and other subjects, please visit me at ladyshia.com. There you can learn about my mentorship circle, the Wolf's Empath workshops, and all the other services and offerings that we have. All music and content are copyright of Lady Shia and the Old Wolf 2021. I hope to get to know you more in the future. And meanwhile, merry meet, merry part, until we merry meet again. Blessed be.